Welcome to the channel. In today's explosive video, we uncover a jaw-dropping scandal within the British royal family. Camilla has reportedly been banned for good from the palace after King Charles uncovered a shocking secret hidden in her secretive plan. What really went on behind those palace walls? Could this be the end of Camilla's royal influence? Stick around as we reveal the full story and all the shocking details. Do you believe Camilla is truly hiding a secret plan that could lead King Charles to permanently banish her from the palace? If you think so, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, leave a 0. Make sure to watch the entire video and hit that subscribe button to support the channel so we can keep bringing you more mind-blowing royal stories. For years, Queen Camilla has stood by King Charles, portraying herself as a pillar of strength. Or at least that's the narrative the palace wants you to believe. Her journey through the royal family has been nothing short of remarkable, from being a widely despised mistress to becoming a symbol of resilience and unwavering loyalty. Her public image has been meticulously sculpted over time, with each step, each smile, and every carefully selected outfit. She's carried the weight of Diana's legacy, endured countless suspicious glances, and in the end, ascended the throne beside the very man who once divided the nation because of her. But behind the scenes, things were shifting. Unsettling signs started to surface. First, a few senior advisors unexpectedly resigned, followed by subtle tweaks to the governance structure of the charity Camilla oversees. Traditionally reserved but highly efficient, Camilla began to take a more prominent role in behind-the-scenes decisions. Some members of Charles's inner circle began to grow suspicious, as those who had once been loyal to him were quietly replaced by individuals aligned with Camilla, a move that seemed both deliberate and strategic. Rumors spread like a cold breeze through the ancient halls of the palace. No one spoke of it openly, but one thing was undeniable. Camilla was quietly building her own sphere of influence alongside that of the king. Whispers of a loyal network began to circulate. Financial decisions, staffing choices, and even the handling of the media were being subtly adjusted, yet they all seemed to carry the unmistakable signature of centralized power, not in Charles's hands, but in Camilla's. Charles, who had always valued his wife's companionship and intuition, began to feel the shift. He found himself left out of meetings he was supposed to lead, learning about key decisions only after they had been made. Some choices were implemented without his formal consent. Decisions made in Camilla's private room. When he inquired, the response was always soothing: "I just wanted to help you take the pressure off." Yet Charles, with his keen royal instincts, knew that power had a way of quietly intoxicating even the most trusted individuals. Then came a document from within a secret memo in which Camilla detailed plans to overhaul the royal media operations, replacing those loyal to Charles with individuals from her own inner circle, giving them greater access to the media. It was more than just a governance move, it was a declaration. Charles wasn't angry, but he understood the gravity of the situation. This was no longer about husband and wife, but about the survival of the institution. He realized that to protect the throne, he might have to confront the one person he had always chosen to stand by him through every storm. But no one dared to connect the dots, let alone speak up. Camilla had become untouchable, shielded by her new title, her closeness to the throne, and her carefully crafted image of unity. Yet those at the core of the royal family, Kate Middleton, Princess Anne, and even William, began to sense a quiet shift in the atmosphere. A new kind of influence was slowly creeping through the palace corridors, bearing Camilla's subtle yet unmistakable mark. Those close to Camilla began to notice subtle shifts. Traditions were being altered without prior discussion, and the king appeared to be growing more isolated, surrounding himself only with Camilla's inner circle. Her children and grandchildren, once excluded from official roles, started making regular appearances at private royal events. While these changes were presented as part of a necessary modernization, there was more lurking beneath the surface. Behind the scenes, Camilla was quietly positioning herself for something far beyond a mere symbolic role. Gradually, Camilla began to reshape the monarchy according to her own vision, until everything took a dramatic turn. Charles was suddenly confronted with something that should never have reached him, perhaps a confidential document, a letter that had slipped through the cracks, or an undisclosed conversation with a staff member. Whatever it was, in that single moment, reality crumbled. The man who had stood by Camilla for years, enduring public scrutiny and sacrificing key relationships for her, now found himself looking at her with growing concern. It wasn't a betrayal of love, it was a calculated move. And for Charles, that made it all the more painful. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the palace shifted irreparably. Appointments were put on hold. Relationships between family members grew distant, even cold. The press began to speculate, though they only knew a fraction of the true story. Behind closed doors, a storm was quietly gathering, with a wounded king at its heart, betrayed by the one person he had trusted above all others. Camilla was swiftly removed from the palace once the truth was exposed. It all began with a forgotten file left on a desk at Clarence's house. At first glance, it appeared to be filled with nothing more than administrative documents, advisor reports, and notes for the king's review. But nestled between two unrelated papers was an untitled, unsigned page completely out of place. Just reading its contents was enough to shake the very foundation of the monarchy. In your opinion, after Camilla's removal, who truly holds influence next to King Charles, do you think Prince William will rise to power? Leave a comment with a 2 if you think so. Or do you suspect Duchess Kate is behind the strategic moves? Leave a 5 if you think it's her. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, so you don't miss out on the next shocking secrets of the royal family. King Charles began reading the first few lines with his usual indifference, the kind reserved for the daily grind of paperwork. But within moments, the tone of the text changed. It was too personal, too calculated, and far too familiar. The memo, drafted by one of Camilla's closest advisors, outlined a detailed strategy to secure long-term control over official engagements, charitable donations, and even public perception. However, what struck Charles the most was not the content, but the language used, the references, the coded names. It was clear that something far more dangerous was at play. It all felt eerily familiar, like the private conversations Charles had shared with Camilla behind closed doors. His hands froze, his stomach twisted. He read it once, then again. Each time, a new wave of disbelief crashed over him. The letter outlined a plan to secure Camilla's family legacy within the royal institution, pushing for the elevation of distant relatives in the line of succession to prominent cultural roles while quietly diminishing the influence of traditional royal figures. The language was subtle, but unmistakably clear, an undercurrent of strategy aimed at undermining Kate William and even Princess Anne. It wasn't merely a power struggle, it was an attempt to reshape the future of the monarchy itself, shifting its focus to her own lineage, not Charles's. But that wasn't all. As Charles continued to sift through the file, he discovered more documents hidden within. Transcripts of private conversations carefully tucked away among the papers. Notes that could only have come from someone with unrestricted access to Camilla's most personal exchanges. Some were emails, others were detailed summaries of phone calls. One particularly striking document was an email from a prominent aristocrat praising Camilla for her role in delaying the Princess of Wales's new education initiative. It was a carefully orchestrated game of influence. The project was Kate's personal passion, a vision she had carefully nurtured for over a year, only to have it repeatedly interrupted for budgetary reasons. Charles wasn't naive. He had brushed aside palace gossip in the past, viewing it as just another part of royal life. But this, it felt different. This wasn't just politics. It was personal. The woman he had stood by for so long was slowly undermining the very principles he had built his reign on: unity, restoration, and continuity. At first he said nothing, not to his advisors, not to Camilla. He simply stayed silent, letting the weight of the situation settle in. Camilla noticed the shift and asked if he was feeling unwell. He mumbled a few half-hearted apologies, then started retreating to his office more often than usual. But inside, his mind was racing, consumed by the growing realization of what was happening. He began meticulously reviewing official appointments, comparing who had been promoted and who had been quietly sidelined. He dug through old files, ones he thought had long been forgotten. Then, in a move no one anticipated, he took a discreet look into the staff, those who had been transferred, reassigned, or quietly retired without any explanation. It was a quiet investigation, but one that held the promise of unsettling truths. One by one, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, confirming his worst suspicions. A former press advisor finally spoke up, saying, "Your Majesty, we were told not to confront her. Some of us have resigned because we couldn't bear the weight of her influence any longer. It felt as though a dam had burst." Charles had at last confronted Camilla, but not with an outburst. His voice was calm, though it carried the heavy, suppressed anger of a man whose patience had finally run dry. They were alone in the royal apartments, no advisors, no courtiers, just husband and wife, king and queen, facing the truth of their fractured relationship. "You've been manipulating me all this time," he said, clutching the papers tightly in his hand. Camilla's face drained of color. For a moment, she was silent, simply staring at him, as if weighing which part of her plan had been uncovered. But her silence spoke volumes, and that was all Charles needed to be certain. "What else have you been doing, Camilla?" he pressed. "What else have you been doing behind my back?" She tried to deflect, shifting the blame onto overzealous staff members, insisting she hadn't written the statement herself, even questioning the authenticity of the notes. But the more she denied, the clearer it became to Charles that the depth of her actions ran far deeper than he had imagined. But Charles had seen enough. Her lies now seemed clumsy, her calm demeanor faltering. The charm she once wielded so effortlessly had been shattered. He didn't scream or accuse her of betrayal, nor did he throw her out that night. Instead, he gave her one simple command before turning to leave the room. "From now on, you will do nothing without my approval." In that moment, the Queen, once a powerful force within the monarchy, had lost it all. The silence that followed felt suffocating, growing louder with each passing second. As the palace braced for a reckoning that no one but those closest to Charles had predicted, Camilla's carefully crafted image as a loyal and discreet figure was crumbling piece by piece, revealing the truth that had been hidden in the shadows for so long. Her plan hadn't been loud or overtly bold. It was quiet, gradual, and cleverly masked as modernization. But now, with the clarity that time provided, Charles could see every move for what it was. the pieces of the puzzle came together, revealing a deeply unsettling picture. Camilla had wanted more than just support. She was after real, lasting power. The true focus wasn't on the crown, but on securing her lineage in the history of the monarchy. Those close to her had begun to notice a shift after her title was solidified. Camilla had subtly started to redirect the institution's focus, gradually shifting attention away from the traditional power structures and toward her own ambitions. It all began with discreet requests. Her children and grandchildren, along with individuals with no aristocratic ties, started showing up at private family gatherings that had traditionally been reserved for those in the direct line of succession. Camilla pushed to attend public events alongside Charles, not merely as a companion, but as a key decision-maker. Behind the scenes, she worked tirelessly to secure positions for her relatives within the royal sphere of influence, titles, patronages, trusted roles, and even control over future financial plans. What stood out most was her singular focus controlling the succession. Whispers began to circulate in the palace corridors, hinting that Camilla was quietly working to undermine William's path to the throne. Initiatives once championed by the Prince of Wales, long supported by the public, have started to face inexplicable delays. Key projects, such as mental health and childcare programs led by Kate Middleton, have encountered sudden and unexplained administrative roadblocks. Moreover, many loyal advisors who had worked closely with the late Princess Diana and who now support William and Kate have been abruptly reassigned to other roles with no clear explanation. This turmoil has created a tense and increasingly questionable atmosphere within the royal family, casting doubt on the stability of the monarchy's future. The project didn't just face delays. A leak of confidential information regarding the ongoing tensions between Princess Kate and Queen Camilla was traced back to a journalist with deep connections to Camilla's PR team. This wasn't merely a battle of public images. It was a calculated effort to weaken William and Kate's influence. Rumors even suggested a broader scheme Camilla was quietly maneuvering to place her nephew Freddie Parker Bowles in significant ceremonial positions within the royal family, solidifying her family's power and securing her own position despite covert resistance from other factions. Although Freddie Parker Bowles held no peerage or position in the line of succession, Camilla is said to have pushed for him to serve as a royal footman at key state events. She also proposed granting him an honorary status rooted in obscure and rarely cited precedents from the monarchy's past. A disillusioned royal advisor revealed that Camilla's intentions were unmistakable. She sought to ensure her bloodline and name would play a visible role in the royal family's future, even if it required altering or rewriting centuries-old traditions. Charles, on the other hand, has consistently dismissed these warning signs, viewing them as a natural progression in the effort to unite the two families after years of division and scandal. However, in reality, Camilla is quietly altering the royal dynamic and power structure, ensuring that everything increasingly revolves around her and the Bowles family. It's a subtle yet ambitious shift designed to solidify her influence not just for the present, but also for future generations. The divide between the royal factions has never been clearer. Kate and William stand firmly within the traditional framework, upholding duty, public service, and respect for the monarchy's enduring values. Meanwhile, Camilla has quietly established a parallel empire where power and influence are secured through connections, arrangements, and manipulation rather than through merit or rightful inheritance. This calculated and risky strategy has raised alarm among many within the palace. What's most concerning is that Camilla fully understands Charles's character and his deepest insecurities. She knows exactly how to exploit them, making every action seem like a thoughtful response, presenting her interventions as genuine support and her manipulations as loyalty. For years, she has expertly played the role of a peacemaker, but in truth, Camilla has been quietly constructing a monarchy within a monarchy with plans to retain power long after Charles steps down. However, as the truth slowly unfolds, that carefully crafted illusion is beginning to unravel. Charles has finally come to the painful realization that the woman he entrusted with his love, protection, and a place by his side on the throne had never stopped plotting, and the cost of her thirst for power would soon be paid. Long before the king saw through Camilla's crafty tactics, there was one who had been watching in silence, Catherine, Princess of Wales. Reserved and adept in the nuances required by royal life, Kate never openly challenged Camilla, but her silence was far from acceptance. Beneath her calm exterior, there were calculated signs, subtle hints that something was amiss. In public, Kate fulfilled the expected role, composed, elegant, and serene. Yet within the palace walls, things began to shift almost immediately after Camilla's coronation. Invitations to family events arrived later than usual, or at times not at all. Camilla's inner circle began to take control of committee decisions, while recommendations from Kate's office were stalled under vague logistical reasons. There were no overt confrontations, nothing blatant, but every action was calculated and deliberate. Kate's childhood project, one of her most personal and meaningful causes, was the first to feel the impact. Despite receiving international praise and backing from education experts, Camilla's team started to prioritize initiatives tied to the new queen's institutions and patronages. Before long, funds were being redirected in ways that raised questions, and Camilla's closest advisors were attending meetings they had never been involved in before. Throughout it all, Kate remained silent. She understood the stakes. The Princess of Wales has spent years learning the unspoken rules of royal life. Above all, she understands that the monarchy is greater than any personal conflict. Rather than confronting her directly, she responds in the only way she knows how, through action. When Camilla proposed a joint public appearance to show unity, Kate politely declined. When asked to collaborate on mental health initiatives backed by Camilla, she stayed focused on her own long-standing goals. Some advisors have even heard her dryly remark, "Let the queen shine." Her demeanor remained calm and deliberate, but there was an undercurrent of quiet unease. Kate's suspicions were confirmed when a leaked conversation between one of Camilla's advisors and a tabloid journalist found its way to William's communications team. The text exchange was a blatant attempt to create a public narrative comparing Kate to Camilla, portraying Kate as inexperienced and distant. Although no names were directly used, the context made the intent clear. For the first time, even senior palace staff acknowledged what Kate had never spoken aloud. "She has never had the best interests of the crown at heart," Kate confided in William. Camilla's focus, as reported by a close source, has always been on herself. Yet when Charles finally realized the full extent of Camilla's manipulations, Kate didn't take solace in being proven right. There was no sense of victory, only sorrow. It was heartbreaking to witness the monarchy unraveling from within once again. She understood the weight now resting on Charles's shoulders. The betrayal wasn't just institutional, it was deeply personal. The road ahead would demand more than just retribution. It would require healing and reconstruction. As the palace discreetly worked to diminish Camilla's influence, Kate embraced a role that was distinctly her own, calm, steady, focused on the future, without making statements or engaging in confrontation, simply by being present. Kate increased her public engagements coordinated with her team to ensure their safety and continued to support those who had been previously targeted. As always, she did so with the same calm and grace that had made Diana a quiet source of inspiration for her. What was different this time? Even in her silence, Kate's influence was undeniable. Prince William, who had long mastered the art of concealing his emotions behind royal protocol, could no longer suppress his fury once he learned of the full extent of Camilla's manipulations. His composed exterior shattered within the palace, and for the first time in years, King Charles saw his son not as the patient heir he had always been, but as a man who would no longer remain silent. William never truly accepted Camilla. He merely tolerated her presence out of respect for his father and the monarchy itself. But the wounds from his mother's suffering had never healed, lingering just beneath the surface. Over the years, he watched as Camilla slowly became more entrenched in the royal system, growing bolder with each move. Despite this, he stayed silent for the sake of the crown, for stability, and to honor the legacy his mother had fought so fiercely to protect. However, when Charles presented him with documents, emails, reports, and recordings that exposed a calculated effort by Camilla to drive both him and Kate away, William's restraint finally broke. She nearly destroyed everything William said through clenched teeth. Everything we worked for, everything she believed in. Charles was taken aback by how deeply those words affected him, for he knew William was right. The monarchy, already fragile in today's modern skeptical world, had struggled to maintain the public's trust. William and Kate had breathed new life into the institution, emphasizing accountability, honesty, and service. In contrast, Camilla had spent years quietly eroding that progress, masking her power grab as a push for modernization. William's outrage was raw and intense. It wasn't just personal, it was visceral. He demanded real accountability, not just symbolic gestures or quiet staff reshuffles. He wanted full transparency within the palace. He insisted that Camilla be stripped of any role that allowed her to influence internal decisions. More than that, he wanted guarantees that nothing like this would ever happen again. She is not part of the future, he told his father. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're not. According to one advisor, Charles was left speechless by the remark. William wasn't exaggerating. The emotional weight of watching his mother be disregarded in the past and now seeing his wife isolated and subtly pushed aside had finally shattered the facade of royal diplomacy. With concrete proof that Camilla had acted with malicious intent, William had lost all patience for political games. What troubled him most wasn't just what Camilla had done, but how she had managed to keep it hidden for so long. The manipulation of the royal structure for her own gain, the slow, deliberate removal of loyal advisors, and her clear intent to elevate her own family. These were the things that truly enraged him. Nothing unfolded overnight. It was a slow, deliberate process, and Charles, whether driven by love, loyalty, or shame, allowed it to happen. William couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal not just from Camilla, but from his father's silence. Why hadn't Charles seen it? Why hadn't he protected them? Despite his fury, William remained resolute. He understood the gravity of the situation. The public could never learn the full truth. The monarchy needed to project an image of unity even when the cracks beneath the surface ran deep. So William did what was necessary. He bottled up his anger and made it clear that things would never return to the way they were. He strengthened his public image, solidified his team of trusted advisors, and shielded Kate from any further interference. Camilla, though still attending events, was now sidelined and stripped of any real influence. Behind the scenes, she was isolated and powerless, and William was no longer the quiet heir waiting in the shadows. He had become the protector of the future, and this time he would not allow history to repeat itself. Princess Anne had always been the quiet enforcer of the monarchy, composed, efficient, and completely loyal to the crown, not to individuals or emotions, but to the institution itself. She had never allowed herself to be distracted by domestic disputes or concerns over popularity. For Anne, duty always came before personal feelings. Yet even she could not ignore the rot that had taken root at the heart of the royal family. A rot now embodied by Camilla. When Charles confided in Anne about what he had uncovered, he braced for criticism or perhaps even a chilling silence. The two had clashed before, particularly over Camilla's increasing influence. Anne had always harbored doubts about the role her sister-in-law was taking on in the royal spotlight. She saw it as a distortion of tradition and a dangerous risk to the monarchy. Yet out of respect for her brother and the need for stability, she had remained silent until now. Charles had barely begun to share his discoveries when Anne cut him off. "You let her go too far, and now the whole house is falling apart," she said, her tone sharp and resolute. It wasn't merely criticism, it was a verdict. Anne rarely allowed her emotions to show, but her words struck harder than any outburst. To her, Camilla's actions weren't just a betrayal of Charles. They were an attack on the monarchy itself, placing her family in roles where they had no rightful claim, undermining William and Kate, silencing loyal servants. This wasn't just palace maneuvering. It was a real threat to the crown's stability. Anne had witnessed this kind of quiet coup before, courtiers exploiting their positions for power with no regard for the long-term damage it caused. The fragility of monarchs creates room for outsiders to gain influence. But this is something different. The threat now comes from within. Camilla hasn't just crossed the line, she has built an empire within the monarchy itself, and until now, no one has stopped her. There's no turning back from this, Anne says, her voice unwavering. Not for her, and frankly not for you, unless you act. For Charles, it is the breaking point. If even Anne, his most loyal, calm, and reasonable sister, has reached this conclusion, it's clear that the situation has gone beyond redemption. Charles fell silent, his eyes lingering on the weary lines etched on Anne's face. He had believed that everything could be reconciled, that love and duty could coexist. But now before him stood his sister, unmoved by emotion, steadfast in her judgment of the common mistakes he had once used to justify Camilla's actions. For Anne, misdirected loyalty was still betrayal, and ambition, even masked as devotion, could threaten the very foundation of the monarchy. When she presented her solution, Charles knew instantly there was no room for compromise, only a choice between losing his dignity or losing the throne. Camilla received the decision with a calm facade, but inside she was seething with fury. Reduced to a purely symbolic role, nothing more than a historical ornament with no real authority, she grasped Anne's message all too well. You may keep the title, but the true power is no longer yours. It wasn't just the loss of influence, it was a devastating blow to the carefully crafted image she had spent decades building. Anne's decision wasn't just personal, it was deeply political. It was a firm assertion that the monarchy could not be swayed by private interests, even those of the king's closest allies. The threat of taking the matter to the Privy Council was not merely a power play, it was a clear signal that Anne was prepared to challenge her brother if he failed to act. In a system known for its gentleness, her unwavering decisiveness sent a shockwave through the corridors of power. To the public, it seemed like minor adjustments, tweaks to schedules, subtle changes in protocol. Camilla appeared less frequently, offering nothing more than a nod before stepping aside. But to those within the palace, it was seen as a soft abdication where power was quietly stripped away without any official announcement. She was still addressed as Queen, still crowned at major events, but her influence had vanished. Her presence was now obligatory, but lacked any true significance. A queen in title, but no longer in essence. As Camilla silently walked through the cold stone corridors of the palace, where she had once held a voice, where she had once been revered, there was nothing but the hollow echo of lost power. Anne's ultimate move had yet to be made, but Camilla knew the truth she had lost. Not due to scandal or public opinion, but because she had been outmaneuvered by a system she had once believed she could control. The monarchy was not a matter of strategy or personal power. It was a legacy, and Anne was its unyielding guardian, steadfast and resolute. Charles nodded quietly, and in that moment he realized the cost of inaction. Anne didn't need to raise her voice or scheme. Her strength was in the unwavering certainty of her beliefs. She had witnessed kings rise and fall, scandals come and go, but this time she would not remain passive. Camilla had made her move, and now it was the crown's turn. Anne would ensure its survival. There were no grand announcements, no farewell speeches. The silence of the palace spoke louder than any words ever could. Over time, Camilla's presence slowly diminished. She kept the title of Queen Consort, but her name vanished from the royal schedule. Her official duties were reassigned for logistical reasons, and the carefully curated images from her PR team faded away. For those aware of the situation behind closed doors, the message was unmistakable. While she had not been physically ousted, she had lost her significance. She remained within the royal walls, but without any real influence. Her office was emptied, and her advisors were dismissed. Her connection to Charles was severed with precision and finality. Within the palace, she became a mere shadow, a pearl-clad figure drifting through the halls where she had once held sway. Charles, though saddened, remained resolute, moving forward with a colder sense of duty. The man who had once risked everything to have her at his side now distanced himself not out of bitterness, but in a bid to preserve the monarchy. The institution needed healing, and that could only be achieved by removing the source of the damage. William and Kate have embraced their roles with greater determination. The emphasis has returned to service, stability, and humility. Public trust has been rebuilt not through speeches, but through the actions of those leading. And right behind them, unwavering and discreet, is Princess Anne, the true strength of the crown. Camilla has not fallen from grace. Rather, she has been sidelined to the margins. The small empire she spent years carefully constructing has crumbled in mere weeks, taking with it any hope of reshaping the monarchy in her image. She wanted to be more than a symbolic queen, but in the end she has become something far less. Not humiliated, not deposed, just erased. Inside the time-worn walls of Buckingham Palace, where Camilla's footsteps had once resonated, an unsettling silence now prevailed. Gone were the whispered conversations with aides, the covert meetings with media strategists. Every trace of her influence had been wiped clean from the smallest details, like her seating at ceremonies to the roles at diplomatic events. Camilla had become nothing more than a distant memory fading quietly into the background of the palace. For King Charles, this decision was not made lightly. He had defied public opinion, risking everything to have Camilla by his side. But now he was the one ordering her removal, not because his feelings had diminished, but because the weight of the crown demanded it. His love had been forced to retreat, tucked away in a drawer of memory, making space for the cold logic of a king. In his eyes, there was no longer passion, only the stark reality of a man who understood that the cost of power was a profound loneliness. The crisis of confidence within the royal family left Charles with no choice but to act. Whispers of Camilla's hidden influence, her behind-the-scenes manipulation, and her attempts to shape things in her favor had begun to tear at the fabric of the palace. Charles could no longer allow the monarchy to become a private political playground. Faced with a decision that would define the future of the crown, he made his choice: Camilla or the institution. And he chose the dynasty. As Camilla faded into the background, William and Kate stepped forward, taking center stage. They didn't need to be flawless. What the public longed for was their quiet, steady, and unpretentious nature. Every gesture, every decision now symbolized a restoration, lifting the monarchy out of the shadow of suspicion and internal conflict. They weren't fighting for the throne, and that very attitude made them the perfect heirs in the eyes of the people. And standing beside them is Princess Anne, a quiet, unassuming figure who doesn't seek the spotlight but remains the crown's most steadfast pillar. Her unwavering dedication has long been respected within the royal family, but it was only after Camilla was erased that Anne's true role became clear. It was she who safeguarded continuity, who ensured that royal standards were upheld and never forgotten. Meanwhile, Camilla existed in an uncomfortable silence. She wasn't a deposed figure nor a victim of scandal, but someone who had simply been cast aside. The media no longer spoke of her with anger or sympathy, but with indifference. A queen without a throne, once so close to the height of influence she could now only observe from a distance, detached from the game of power like an irrelevant chess piece. In her private room, surrounded by old photographs and a mirror that no longer reflected her former glory, Camilla finally confronted herself. She had longed for more than just a symbol. She had wanted to be a true partner in power, to leave her legacy on royal history. But the end came as a quiet verdict, not deposed, not humiliated, but ignored. A frozen icon still alive, yet no longer alive in the eyes of the public. And that's the latest shakeup in the British royal family. Camilla's ban from the palace has not only sparked public debate, but also raised many questions about the royal family's future. Could this be the sign of an underground crisis brewing? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the latest developments in this story and many more royal secrets. See you in the next video.